And good evening and welcome to this session. I know a number of you have been on a few of these sessions over the last week, and I can't thank you enough for your contributions. They really will make a massive difference to our society and the influence. And tonight's session is no different. So we're going to focus tonight on the theme of education. And I know from looking at the attendee list, there's a huge number of passionate individuals that have education in their hearts. And so we're hoping to fetch that passion into this session. So you will know that as part of the pre-reading to this session, we talk about your co-op sustainability session as it's headed up, creating a positive impact on people's lives for the longer term. And I'm going to explain a little bit about that in a minute. For those of you that I don't know so well, my name's Tara Simmons. I'm the General Manager for Cooperative Social Responsibility here at Your Co-op. And I'm going to be supported by a number of colleagues and speakers this evening. My colleague Pranil is behind the scenes and he's pressing the buttons and dealing with the technology, which gives me great comfort, can I just say. And my colleague Marnie is also joining us this evening from the Developing Young People team. We've also got a couple, Amber Beta from the childcare team, and then a couple of external subject matter experts, educationalists, absolutely top of their game in their careers. So firstly, I just want to run through a little bit of housekeeping. I can tell if those of you who've known me a while will realise I'm actually going through a script here that I helped write. If I stick to this script, it will be a miracle, but I will do my best to make sure I cover everything for you this evening. So housekeeping. Firstly, to just say that my colleague Pranil has now started recording the session this evening. The reason for that is that so we can play this session back, and our members who unfortunately couldn't make it tonight can actually view this session. If you don't want your image to be shown on the recording, you can turn your camera off, but delighted if you leave it on as well as. What I also would ask is that you ensure that your microphones are off during the presentation, unless you're a speaker. That just makes sure that we don't get background noise. And there will be plenty of times for questions and feedback during the session. However, entirely up to you. If you've got a pen and paper at hand, that might be really useful, because we're actually going to do some little things later on to sort of energise some of those ideas and suggestions. But please use the chat function as we go along to put any questions, observations, and my colleague Pranil is going to facilitate those for us as we move through this evening. A couple of things just from a housekeeping point of view as well as, is that we have learned through this process that there's technical challenges with regard to watching videos. So there's a number of videos going to be used during the presentation, and I'm hoping that many of you watch them without any hiccup whatsoever. We have noticed that some of you that may actually be joining through a browser rather than directly through the Teams app maybe have some challenges with you being able to hear videos but not necessarily see them. But don't worry, if you can download the Teams app, then great, and sort of go into the presentation that way. But we will make these available to everybody as well as. It may also be challenging with regard to your bandwidth, a problem that I have personally when I'm at home as well as. Before I introduce the other speakers, I just want to go through a couple of things with you with regard to the session today. As we've said, the spirit of today's session is really quite key. As a cooperative, how you will know as we approach talking to our members and engaging with the members is completely different to other organisations. We see everyone's view as important. We're all here as members of our cooperative. We're owners of our cooperative, therefore everybody's view might be different, but it's as important as the next person's. Feel free to say whatever you think and put that into the chat. There's no right or wrong. Tonight we're going to have some open discussions. We haven't got the answers, and we really want to build on others' ideas as well as. So, as it comes into your head, please just put that in the chat or put your hand up if you can, and we will go to you and discuss that through. But tonight for us is very much about making sure that we come out of tonight's session having a real view around what you believe the educational agenda as a progressive co-op as we are should be. So before I do that, again, some of you, I make no apologies, but this might be the second or the third time you've seen this video. There's a video now about the introduction to the society and the areas which we're involved within. So Pranil, over to you. Thank you, Pranil. And again, no apologies. We want to let all our members, we have over 700,000 members, know what we're doing tonight and actually wonder why they're not here as well as. So if you are active on social media, Facebook or Twitter, you can see that they're the areas where we would like you to put out your messages. Pranil has kindly put the link in there to Twitter, so feel free to take photographs of the screens and to promote out what we're doing here this evening. We're delighted to have this time with you. So tonight's agenda. We're going to look in a second at the sessions, the detail of the session, the aims and objectives, update on what your co-op is doing within the subject area of education. We're going to talk about the broader societal trends, issues and opportunities, plenty of time for questions and answers around the presentations, and then we can do something that we call possibility thinking. And this is where I'd ask you to keep your pen and papers handy, or to really sort of make sure you capture those thoughts as you go through the session, because what we want to do as part of the second part of this session is capture your thoughts as members, as owners, of where you think we should consider as a cooperative planning in the next 5 years to take our educational agenda. Now that's really wide. The spectrum of education is huge, but we really want you to contribute to that. So just a little background of how we're going about this. We as a society are looking at planning our 5-year sustainability plan and strategy, and we're engaging with members in all of the areas of that, and it will, as I say, form part of the possibility sessions. This is actually the last one of those sessions that will actually inform that strategy. We're going to kickstart all of your suggestions directly into those discussions that will follow, and then we will start to drive how we're, as the slide is saying here, creating a positive impact on people's lives for the longer term. With the mantra, and something I really want you to keep in mind as well as, is that a cooperative, but also something that we're committed to here at Midcounties, is ensuring that no one is left behind. So a little bit of an overview there of some of the things that we're already involved with our community groups. We have our young co-operator network, clearly our board getting involved in those sustainability subjects, as well as we're looking at supplier partners, the member engagement committee, regional communities, our industry experts, and John Clark, who is on the call this evening and going to be talking shortly. Actually, he's one of the people that we've referred to, particularly with the experiential learning, out with the Outward Bound Trust, a charity partner that we've supported for a long time. So lots of things that we're already doing around the area of sustainability, but we want to really focus in on education this evening. So Before we go any further, what I'd really like to share with you is some thoughts of the next generation of cooperators. So if we think about 5 years, it feels like a lifetime away. We all know, and I would believe many of us are of an age where we know just how quickly time goes, and 5 years will be here before we know it. Certainly, who'd have thought this time last year we would have still been in the position that we're in, and with the recovery of COVID. But actually, there's a group of stakeholders that we love dearly and are a real part of Midcounties Cooperative, and that's our little pioneers in our nurseries. And we want to think big. If we're looking at a 5-year strategy, this is not about, localized stuff necessarily. This is about how we can focus on 2 or 3 big things that are going to make a measurable difference, that are going to be consistent through the next 5 years. Things that we can really start to measure and really put some effort and investment behind. And so we asked our little pioneers in our nurseries what they thought. And here's what they said.
What would you like to be when you grow up? A golfer.
Fireman. A princess.
And a princess.
If you were in charge of the world, what would you do?
Save the batteries. Save the batteries. And I'll pick up all the rubbish on the floor. And I even saw some rubbish in a little stream on the 2 sides.
Oh no.
That's my nanny and granddad.
What would you like to be when you grow up?
I'll be a superhero.
You want to be a superhero? What about you, Toby?
I'll be Spider-Man.
You want to be Spider-Man?
How do you think we can save the planet?
By not wasting the planet.
Yeah?
By not using the electricity so much.
When you grow up, what would you like to be?
I want to be a ballerina. I like to be a ballerina.
If you was in charge of the world, what would you do?
Tell people what to do.
How can we look after each other better?
Cuddling.
Okay, and I don't think any of us could have said it any better. And clearly we were going to send the video off to Boris Johnson now that he's allowing cuddling and hugging to go on. And we wanted to let him know that our young pioneers thought of that first. And they really believe that hugging each other and cuddling the world is the way forward. So thinking big is the theme for the session today. So when you're starting to think about as what we should consider as Midcounties Cooperative, think big. We can't change everything, but we can change some things. We have a huge influence as a cooperative, a national cooperative, but also an international cooperative. So, please don't restrict your thoughts to specific local areas. Okay, so talking about education. So can we really start to think about, from our point of view, what does education mean to Midcounties Cooperative? So if we look at the next slide, we, as I said, have a range of things that we've been involved in Midcounties. We're pretty good at this stuff. We know, we've had this conversation, we're pretty good at what we do on a sustainability agenda. You saw from the video, we've been recognised for that internationally with the Eddie Awards, but also nationally through the work that we're doing. We're seen as a leader with lots of the things that we're doing. and we are pretty good. We're not necessarily great at telling the story at times, and a criticism is that what we consider to be business as usual is really exceptional by others. And I know some of our speakers and guests on the call today are very clear when they tell us that. But just a few things that we've been involved in where we are ensuring that diversity and inclusion is also part of our education agenda, talking about cooperative values, the cooperative movement and the cooperative as a business model, looking at how we're promoting a cooperative thought process with regard to the leaders of our society for the next generations. We're helping those that maybe have been left behind. I mentioned Kate from Just Straight Talk, who's a great supporter, but also a great partner in Midcounties, and her role in the charity that she runs is very much about making sure those people who maybe felt outside of the support mechanism of society are picked up, are able to get back on their feet and to contribute the best that they can to society and be the best that they can. From the work we're doing with our young co-operators in our nurseries and our little pioneers, but also, inspiring the generation about the bigger topics, working with our environmental ambassador, Cal Major, fantastic role model, young woman, qualified vet, also set up a number of charities, holds a couple of world records, but actually speaks at the level of our young co-operators and makes sure they understand that they can really, pick up on the things that are need be. The next thing I want to do is actually introduce my colleague Marnie Richards, who I introduced earlier as our young cooperative and coordinator. And Marnie's going to talk to you about a little bit about the work that she does driving our schools programme in particular. So over to you, Marnie.
Hi, good evening everybody. So I'm Marnie Richards and I'm the Developing Young People Coordinator for Midcounties. Since I've been in the role since 2015, we've done a whole host of various activities and programmes of events to support young people. This ranges from primary schools through to the further education establishments. And I'm the one with my colleague James that drives this within the society. The sort of activities that we do start from primary school age, which could be like stores as classrooms, getting young people to visit our sites and do educational activities, through to stores as galleries in which young people are able to do artwork, and we display this in stores. We celebrate national events, Fair Trade Fortnight, with a sustainability sort of topic as well, which covers Earth Hour, National Recycling Week, and I think we've got World Environmental Day, which will take place in June. For our offer for secondary schools, we have a whole host of employability events, which take shape in the form of CV writing, team building, leadership. And then we've gone to larger events in which we did a crazy composer sort of session that we did that enables young people to work as a community, work together, learn about sustainability and learn to play instruments. But the latest thing that we're looking to promote is the Young Co-operators Network, which is aimed at engaging 16 to 25-year-olds to provide a platform for them to talk to us and tell them what matters to them. So our overall strategy aims to influence and inspire and inform young people. And we do this influencing by making sure young people understand the benefits of cooperation and they become active and contribute to this, that we inspire them to be the best they can be through our career opportunities, that we're an employer of choice and what we can offer them. And to inform young people, so that might be about our DOES values and about education programmes. Okay, Tara?
That's great, Marnie. Thank you for that overview. From Midcounties' point of view, we appreciate that you say we do lots, but actually we refer to our educational specialists and our partners in that field to really inform. And we've invited 3 of them this evening, and I'm delighted. On top of a normal day's work, I don't think there's anything normal working in education, I can imagine, at the moment, but certainly they have committed to giving their time this evening really to give an educationalist view around the subjects of education, to hopefully inform and inspire some of the conversations and discussions and your thinking later on. So first of all, I'd like to introduce John Clark. So John Clark is the Senior Deputy Head at Walsall Academy. John, if you could put your camera on and maybe introduce yourself, that would be useful.
Yeah, I think my camera's on, Tara, so good evening. My name's John Clark. I'm Shadow Head Senior Deputy at Walsall Academy. I'm also an educational researcher. I was awarded a Winston Churchill Fellowship in 2017 and spent time working in Detroit and New York City, looking at a method of learning called expeditionary learning. I've been an advisor to the Outward Bound Trust now for over 12 years, and I've completed 104 Outward Bound courses. I've also led young people all over the world on expeditions because my sort of mantra is there's no such thing as can't, you just haven't done it yet. We've been to Everest Base Camp, a couple of trips out to Ethiopia to do environmental projects, tracking Ethiopian wolves and working with local communities and self-help and action groups. And 2 years ago, I was out in Kashmir. Working in a large secondary school of 1,400 children in North Walsall. We know what an all-ability school looks like, and we know about what the challenges look like for our present community. And at the moment, our big thing is rebuilding and pressing the restart button, but hopefully the restart button will allow us to be better than we were, not back to what we were, because the future could be fantastic. And I think we've been given an opportunity now to reset as educationalists about what we think about education and how it all works, but also in terms of trying to influence governmental policy.
Thank you very much, John, for that overview, and we'll come back to you shortly as a specialist in that area. Natalie, if I can ask you to introduce yourself and give us a bit of background as well as, please.
Yeah, no problem. I think my camera's on now, hopefully. I'm Natalie Hawkins. I'm the principal at North Walsall Primary Academy, so just down the road from John, actually. I've been at that school, and this is my 4th year that I've been at North Walsall. Prior to that, I worked at art schools for 6 years, so across central Birmingham, so always worked in very similar demographics. I'm also a pupil premium assessor, so I go into schools and assess schools on how they use their pupil premium money. And the reason I'm discussing pupil premium is because later on I'll be discussing the lack of pupil premium funding in a bit more detail and how that's currently affecting schools post-pandemic.
Thank you, Natalie. And Babita.
Put on my speaker. Hello there. So I'm the cooperative. I work for the Cooperative Childcare, and I'm the Quality Excellence Manager. And I have over 26 years of experience now in early years. I've got 3 children of my own, so I'm always kept busy, aging from 12 to 21. So I've worked in early years for 26 years, working with a variety of families from different walks of life. And I've got a real passion for early years and improving outcomes for children. And that's something that I've done from a very early age, looking after my own family, but definitely all across daycare nurseries. And I've had obviously a range of nurseries that I support at the moment, so all 45. But in the past, I've worked for college-based nurseries, so the whole lifelong learning is really important to me as well.
That's great, Babita. Thank you so much. And so, as you can see, as a group this evening, we've got a real wide range of the whole life cycle of education. And I know that John and Natalie both can talk with confidence as well about sort of adult education and how all of that sort of links together with what they're doing. So as has already started, please start asking your questions in the chat and we'll pick those up as we go along. But I'd actually like to go back to John now. And John, really, you know, tonight's session is about how we as a cooperative can start to think about the big things in education that we think we can add the biggest value to in the next 5 years. So I'd just like you to talk about your thoughts on that, but also what you believe are the trends worldwide and facing us as a world around education, but certainly us as a nation here in the UK.
Right, it's a big agenda, but obviously we're just coming out now of the lockdowns, and the impact that we've seen on our young people has been great, because what we've actually been seeing is teachers have done an amazing job. I get incensed every time the television comes on and they say that children have lost their learning and they didn't learn during lockdown. And I think of all those teachers who worked so hard, who learned to use online learning very, very quickly. But what we were doing was we were actually imputing information. We were just pushing information out, especially in secondary, because we never knew what was going to happen. And at the moment, what we're seeing is a process of teacher assessed grades, which are not what they were sold at by the government, and has put a massive strain on teaching staff who've done an incredible job, because imagine you're actually doing your job of teaching as well as childcare at home. So to all the teachers out there, well done. You've done a fantastic job. As leaders in education, what we've got to do now is, do we really need in secondary more maths and English? Or do we really want to do something that's going to make the difference to the young person? I am a champion of character education. Character education, thinking about the whole person and the holistic development of young people, the ability to problem solve, the ability to have resilience, the ability to communicate their own thoughts effectively to make a reasoned judgment for their future. Because one thing that this pandemic has done is it's stopped league tables and it's stopped schools being pushed against each other to make a thought process of, I've got to beat this school, I'm going to do it to pass an exam. When we talk about sustainability, I think really we need to think about sustainable learning, because we never stop learning. We're not stopping as we get older. We still continue. We learn every single day. So why is it we've pigeonholed schools into learning while you're at school? And what are the wider experiences? Obviously, working in the school, and you know, I'll take Natalie's points on this one, because working in a school with a high level of deprivation, we're now thinking about, we need to get our young children out. We need to get them to theatres. We need to get them to have those experiences that for 2 years they've not been able to have. And through those experiences and through experiential learning, maybe we can make more of a difference with our young people, because we can give them real world experiences. Resilience seems to be very low at the moment, especially with younger students, because they've come into secondary school, they've been force-fed over this digital learning platform. It's very instant gratification. It's, if you don't like it, turn it off. Oh, I haven't been bothered to do that, I haven't turned it up, because it's very hard for a teacher to track it all and to see young faces. Now they're back in the classroom. It's about consolidating the learning and getting children to talk. And through, you know, the discussion and talk and things that have gone on, we can start to make those inroads into education. So if we're looking about sustainability and where we're going, we need to give relevance to why we're learning to our young people. We need to extend their thought process so they've got a deeper learning strategy. And it's not just about maths and English, but it is about that holistic development of understanding the world they live in and the difference they can make. Because our young people are actually more environmentally aware than ever before. They can make the difference going forwards in terms of sustainability, environmental protection, but also just daily things that they can do. So my sort of challenge to everybody who's listening is that I know that you're all probably very behind education. You've had an education yourselves, and you're thinking about your own experiences. Our education system in secondary has not really changed since about 1920, because we're still doing the same things. Is it not about time that we jump into the 21st century? Our children are far better at using IT and information technology than ever before. Why do they need to write an exam? Why do we have this divide between primary school and secondary school? Should not be greater joined up thinking with all through strategies where there is better communication between primary and secondary, or they are one body experience, and running through on those themes. Natalie will be the expert on year 6, and I'm hoping that she is cheering like I am that year 6s haven't had to go through SATs this year, and they can do all of those fantastic creative things. Because when you're a child and you reflect, and when you're an adult, when you reflect on your own learning, you don't remember the maths and English lessons. What you remember is that day we did this at school and we created something which sparked the enthusiasm for life and lifelong learning. There you go. Wow. Some sound bites for you, Tara.
Thank you very much, John. Absolutely. I'd like to say, Natalie, do you want to follow that? But certainly I know that you can build on that as well as. So again, I'll pose the same question to you with regard to, you know, what is it do you think the challenges are within education in the next few years, and certainly going into 5 years?
Yeah, thank you. Some of what I'm going to discuss does link to actually what John's just talked to you about, and it links quite nicely. Actually, it's almost like we did this in advance. I am going to centre it a little bit around funding to begin with, and that's because, as I've said, I do assess pupil premium and pupil premium spend, and a lot of money that deprived schools get comes from pupil premium. And it's really important to schools such as the ones that John and I do work in that we get that kind of funding. Now, this year, the government have changed the way in which they collect the data that supports the pupil premium funding. They're taking it at an early date. So normally it comes in the spring census, but they're actually collecting it in the autumn census in the October. Now, speaking on behalf of my school, we're a very small one-form entry school. In terms of funding, we're going to miss out on just under £4,000. Now, I've done some data crunching across our network and some of our wider schools. We're going to lose out on £68,000 in the first instance of funding that comes from pupil premium, and that is purely down to when the government have decided they're going to collect that data. So a simple shift that you might think doesn't mean anything, actually in real terms, massive impact. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because that money is spent on those things that John was just talking about. So we take our children in year 6 every year on a residential, and it's 95% funded through pupil premium. A little bit of a contribution from the parents, that's it. We take our children to Oxford University, a Russell Group university, every single year, because we are in a community whereby they're not exposed to that every day, and why shouldn't they be? So we aim for the very highest. We take them to local universities as well, because that's just as important, but we have that relationship built. It costs money. Now, luckily, Marnie, over the years, has supported us really well, and it's not with money, because that's not what we needed. What we needed was people. So Marnie sent cooperative volunteers with us to Oxford University, because that's what we needed. We needed people. Those opportunities are only possible with that type of funding, and obviously that funding is not going to be there. Now, this is going to happen to every single school across the entire country, and if you are in a demographic like we are, you're going to suffer more. You're going to feel it far worse than any other school. Another aspect of funding that I think is really important to talk about is the SEND funding. So obviously, when a child has a statement, they get a certain amount of money that allows you to do additional things within your building. Now, we have a couple of little tiddlers that have come through nursery, and we've started building our evidence base, and it's really important that you get 3 terms of evidence. Come to us in reception, fabulous. And we've started to build that evidence, ready to put a plan in for them to request an EHCP. We went into lockdown. Those little tiddlers haven't been seen. So we're not ready to put that paperwork through, but they still need that one-to-one. So we're having to fund it, and we're not going to be able to put that paperwork through until July. And there's a backlog of up to 14 to 16 weeks with Walsall Local Authority to process that paperwork. So we're not going to get the plan authorised. We know we will, because these little tiddlers need it, but we're not going to get the money because you're always a term behind. So actually, we're going to have to fund a one-to-one for these little ones with no money coming in. So we're being hit from every direction. And that's going to impact hugely because, again, the curriculum costs we cover. We get that through the GAG funding. It's the other bits and pieces that we can't afford, like your trips. Marnie, you know, you come to the seaside with us every year. We take the entire school, every single child, from nursery to year 6 to the seaside, fully covered with cost on one day, on multiple coaches. Off we go. Of which Marnie came with us, and we've had a lot of volunteers from the cooperative because that's what's important. But we fund that, and that's where schools are going to struggle. It's that other side of education that when you serve the demographics we do, and that cultural capital, that exposure to the theatre. Like John said, we take all of our children to the theatre every year for Christmas. It's something we do because we want to expose them to that way of life. And those funding applications that we're now going to be missing, and we're talking tens of thousands here, we're not talking a couple of thousand, it's going to reduce the possibilities that we currently have within education to do those types of things. So although, yes, the funding is being cut, from a cooperative point of view, how can you help? Well, actually, yeah, you can do little bits like that. And, you know, we can apply for your carrier bag funds, etc. But we need people. We need volunteers. We need people to come in and do the gardening clubs with us and go to the seaside and come to the theatre and really get immersed in our school. And I can't underestimate the impact that's had over the past 3 years. Your cooperative supporters came in fancy dress on World Book Day, one dressed as a knight, and they came to Birmingham. They came on a train to Birmingham city centre to the Waterstones with the children dressed as a knight. You can't underestimate that impact. So although I'm talking to you about funding, money isn't always the answer. You know, people are just as important as the money aspect. And another small thing, and I think, John, you won't see this side of it. Secondary schools get funding for sanitary products for young ladies. Up until this year, so did year 6. That's been cut. The government have cut the funding now. So we have to buy the sanitary products for the year 6 girls and year 5 to do that talk, to give them the little packs and to provide that. And it doesn't sound like a lot, but again, where do you think that money comes from? Well, it comes from the pupil premium, and that pupil premium has just been cut. So when you look at your stores, your shops, your supermarkets, you know, how could they support? Well, actually, would you be able to support us by donating some sanitary products that we can then use for the year 6 girls? There's lots of ways of doing it, but I think these are the types of areas where education is going to struggle, and this is only going to get worse because this is the first time that they're clawing back the PP money in this way, and the first time that we're actually facing such a large backlog of SEN applications. And it's those little things that actually are going to hit us. Yes, it's the bottom line, but it's the holistic bottom line it's hitting, because we're never going to stop buying exercise books and we're never going to stop paying teachers, but we've got to make the cut somewhere because that money's not coming in. And it's those other aspects that John was referring to, the things that make the difference in schools, the residentials, the theatre, the seaside, that are really going to hit. And that's what's going to stop our children from developing into the adults we want them to be, so they can be successful. And if they wish to go into education further, university, they've got what they need to do that. Or if they want to go straight into the workforce, they've got the skills that they need to. Are they able to socialise? Those are the types of things that we're actually going to really struggle with over the next 3 to 5 years. And actually, I would argue it's happening right now. You're already seeing that because we haven't taken them off site because we haven't been able to. And that opportunity is now lost. So I think I'll leave it there, and then we can
pick back up. Natalie, thank you so much, and you talk with so much passion and emotion. It's hard not to be moved when you look at the reality of the practical day-to-day the challenges that are facing education at different levels. Some of it coming down to money, some of it coming down to the way in which we do things and the challenges that are faced. So that's great. Can I also bring in Babita now? So Babita, you see things even earlier on. So, we had a conversation about the impact, particularly of COVID, on our under 5s, as it were. But actually, if you'd like to talk around that as well, as that would be useful, I think, just to give it a bit of context.
Fab. I just want to touch on Natalie's point about the SEND children. So we've experienced that in our nurseries where the support has just not been there. So we've had to do a lot of like contacting the local authority and just trying to get them in, and they've got, you know, a backlog of SEND children that they've got to see. But there's so many missed opportunities, and we're not supporting the SEND children the way we should be. But we're very fortunate because we've got quite a few specialists in our the co-op group which have come out and supported those nurseries. So we didn't have, luckily, you know, really had really big setbacks, because from our 20 children that had attended our nurseries, we had 12 that progressed to the next stage of their development through the techniques that we had and supported them. So we were really lucky. But standalone nurseries and other small providers just are not going to have that training for their colleagues. So I think training is a massive key player for colleagues. So the effects of COVID, yes. So the children that have been coming in, we found that the PSED has been affected. So their personal, social and emotional development has. And what we did find is a lot of them took longer to settle. So although some of our nurseries still were open for, you know, families that were working during COVID, we still had children that were coming in because of a vulnerable backgrounds. And what we just found was they didn't no longer, so some children that were toileted before came back, had accidents in terms of their own personal needs, their toileting needs. We had setbacks around that. Children's behaviour was also affected. So that needed a lot more attention. We had to bring back our values and our strategies that we use within our nurseries to get that back on track. So yes, children have been affected, you know, due to COVID. But we're really fortunate, like I said, and we have been working on our own learning approach, our pedagogy. So all the values and all the techniques and all the strategies and initiatives that we do to develop children have really helped us along. So, you know, all around sustainability, you know, all the eco school programs that we've been working on, promoting children to have their say, the democracy. So we've piloted a new program called Investing in Children. So we really support children to promote that social responsibility, but also that sense of belonging in nurseries. So it just makes it easier for them to settle. So they're listened to all the time in every opportunity we have. So even choosing what snack they want, you know, what activities they want to take part in. And I really believe that actually having a solid curriculum or strategies and initiatives in place is a key lever to making sure that children are improving their outcomes. And it's underestimated that, you know, we should have a programme for all children that is at a high level. And I just feel that that's the key lever, and we should be promoting this as much as we can, making sure they have, you know, a holistic curriculum, a wide range of you know, activities that they can take part in, you know, being in the outdoors, forest school, that's something that's really close to us as well. But all of those things, having that indoor and outdoor play. I was just at a nursery this week and they said that we're really promoting cultural capital, and that sits within the EYFS. And they said, and I said, well, tell me how you support cultural capital. They said, well, a lot of our children live in high-rise flats and they haven't got access to gardens. So you can see today all of our children are outside. So it's all those little things that matter, and all those positive experiences we give to children are going to make the real difference. So I really believe one of the key drivers will be just making sure that there's a well-established curriculum that's embedded, and the education experiences that we give to children.
That's great, Babita, and thank you all for that food for thought there. And I think what I'm picking up from that is what you're saying is that we've got some real challenges ahead, and you know, in 5 years' time we've got a group of the next generation of co-operators, but also the next generation of workforce, of parents, have really been affected by things that are happening now. So we really need to be thinking about what does that 5-year strategy look like. So I can see there's a number of questions in the chat, and maybe we can pick some of those up as we go along. So if I could just ask my colleague Pranil, do you want to go through a few of those in the chat?
Yeah, I'll just highlight a few that I've picked up. Some have been actually answered, so thank you everyone for providing your questions to everybody and everyone for engaging. One that Julian, you've asked, how do you see the young cooperators contributing to this over the next few years? As in, what you said was the Mid-Counties does great work to support local communities. Marnie, is that something you want to expand on? I know you've answered the question in the chat, but there might be something that you want to further expand on.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Julian. So our plan, obviously, as our regional communities pick up now, looking to get started again in September, and it's our plan to have representation from our young cooperators on each of those regional community steering groups, so they can have their say and get involved. We also want to provide a lot of volunteering opportunities, within the community, whether that may be, litter picking or something about young people. I know we're linking up with a great group about dementia awareness, and we're linking, dementia awareness training for our young cooperators. So that's a great example of how we can combine the two in the community moving forward. And also letting our young cooperators select sort of young people organisations that we can work with and charities, and then work with the community.
Thanks, Marnie. The next question that we've had from Christopher, which is, if your school isn't a cooperative academy, how can Mid-Counties influence them in a positive cooperative way?
Okay, so different ways we can do this is, and how we do this is with our education sort of programme. We run a whole sort of programme on, our DOES values and what they are, and also co-op fortnight, and how we can educate them about the cooperative business model and our values. So that's also always in our activities programme, and then the whole sustainability piece as well. So that's really positive, it's really engaging, and we get a lot of over 50 partner schools that engage with that each year about our cooperative difference and what makes us different as a business and as an employer.
Can I just bring John and Natalie into that? You've worked with the Society for a while now. John, can I just ask you what you think the answer to that question would be? That your school isn't a cooperative academy. You're very au fait with the cooperative academy model. But how do you think that Mid-Counties influences your school and the curriculum there as a non-cooperative academy?
When I was first told because we met many years ago through Outward Bound Trust, I was there at an event, and I was led into this idea of these great DOES values, and somebody said, well, it's big about democracy. So how do you do democracy in your school? Well, we have student council elections, and our student council have real teeth. In fact, they look at most of our major policies, and they're elected. So our student council, our head boy and head girl, will be elected by the student body in the next 2 months for the next 12 months. So we have democracy, we vote on things, and they also decide on what we do in terms of our charities. So then this idea of openness, well, we actually questionnaire our student, we have student voice. At the end of every block of curriculum, because we work in a 10-unit block, we actually ask the students to review it and give us feedback on the learning experience that they have had, which influences how the teacher actually engages the young people in their learning for the next module, their practices, how they teach. And we have a great view that is actually the most informative part, not the teacher, but actually the students first. We are very clear on our equality statements, our inclusion. We have done a lot of work this year on anti-racism, Black Lives Matter. Our word of the week 2 weeks ago was misogyny. So if anybody wants to go and look up that one, that'll help you find out. But social responsibility is something that we've been, it's at the heart of what we do. I was taken aback. I mean, I've worked in the West Midlands now, even though I've been a northerner for nearly 25 years. And when I was helping set up Walsall Academy, and we were in the early years, we'd run charity events, and we are always blown away by the generosity of people who we know our families have very little, but they want to give. Our food bank collections are amazing. We fill 2 or 3 minibuses. We do 2 months of collection. So social responsibility is there. So even though we're not branded as a cooperative academy, we are real people, and we just see it as part of our life and our DNA in what we do, that it's actually there anyway. And that's why the fit when we started working with Midcounties was so easy, to actually see how the links were there. So I don't see it as being a cooperative academy, and I don't see that these are values that should be said that are discrete. They are just integral, and they are actually intrinsic into a young person's learning and into most successful schools. Because if you look at most successful schools, they're a learning community. They are people who work together. They are not hierarchical structures, but also they deal with social action and social responsibility. And that's actually what education is about. It's a social responsibility to help educate the next generation, because we will only be as good as our children will make our world.
Wow, powerful statement to end on. And Natalie, the work with your school, how do you think the cooperative values have sort of been demonstrated there?
I think for us personally, it's the dedication of time and the fact that you've invested people, which is really important, because actually people are usually an expensive commodity. And actually what it's shown our children is that we have volunteers, and we went through the whole process of what a volunteer was, because many of our children didn't know what a volunteer was. So when we talked about what a volunteer did and what the purpose of volunteering was, they were amazed that they could get someone to do my job for free. Was the first thing they thought. That's fine, we're just going to replace you with lots of volunteers, which was wonderful. But they've immersed themselves within our sort of family. So whenever we have school fairs, Christmas events, they join us, and they bring the cooperative stalls. So what we say is, would you like to bring a different stall along? Would you like to showcase what you do? So we've had the funeral team came actually to the summer fair, and they did a stall with all the funeral information, and the children were encouraged to go up and talk to the people about funerals, which is usually a really difficult conversation to have with particularly young children. But they were so enthusiastic about having this conversation with these people, because they actually came in the outfit, the top hat and tails, the black, and the children wanted to know everything. So for us, it's the values of giving. It's about giving time and expertise, like you've spoken about, and that's something we're not trying to have those types of conversations. We're not in that industry, so actually having people in to share their time and their expertise with us for free, which the children thought was amazing, is really important. And then having us sort of come to you. So we've done trips to your local stores and looked at how the food is sold and how it gets to the shelves. And to my absolute dismay, they came back with jammy donuts, and I thought, right, we're a healthy school, and they came back with sticky jam donuts, but they loved it. It's that kind of thing. The car washing, we've done the car washing with you before, so it's that giving for free, and that actually something doesn't have to cost to be important, and that time of sharing. Because now when they get people from the cooperative, they know who the cooperative are, they know that they're there to support, and actually for quite a long period of time we had regular people who we became really, really close with, particularly from your energy department. So it was really, really sad for us when your energy department sort of disappeared and wasn't there anymore. And actually a few of the members came over to see us, and we said goodbye, and it was a shame, because we'd worked with them for 18 months or more, and they knew them by name, and we'd built that sort of relationship. So that's really important. And when you talk about the values and being part of the community, to know people by face and by name purely through volunteering is something actually you don't really get anywhere else.
Brilliant. Okay, so I'm conscious that if we were all together physically, by now I would have provided you with a sandwich and said thank you for joining us this evening. I unfortunately can't provide you with a virtual sandwich, but I'm going to use the same line that I would normally use, and that is there's no such thing as a free sandwich. So this is where we're actually going to ask you to contribute, and our educationists are here. We're going to look look at answering some of the queries and the observations and the questions that are in the chat also. But I'd also ask you now just to think for me, just take 3 or 4 minutes to think about what you've heard, and if you were in our position of creating a 5-year strategy to create the best educational strategy for the society, linking it into our sustainability strategy with the mantras of creating a positive impact on people's lives for the longer term. So this is about, you know, how we make a difference today, but it also is about that impact later on for those people. How we ensure that nobody's left behind. What could we possibly do that would make an impact that we could say that group of people were not left behind? And also, you know, that great all-encompassing phrase of supporting our next generation to be the best they can be. So we have a challenge to be able to come up with, by the end of the summer, 3 or 4 big things that we want to say, that's what we're going to nail to the mast. That's what we're going to drive. We're going to do some of that other stuff and that lovely stuff that Natalie talks about, you know, the volunteering and whatever that goes on. But what are the big things you think, as members and owners of this business, we should be aiming to consider or aiming to change in the next few years to say that we've really made a difference? And as I say, don't think just locally. Some of that local stuff happens as part of our DNA. It happens about what we do. But what's the big stuff maybe on a, you know, wider geographical level, national level, international level? What are the things we ought to be doing? You know, I won't lead the conversation, but just a few things that have come out in here. You know, should we be thinking about setting up a cooperative, your co-op, Midcounties cooperative academy? Should we be looking at focusing on primary school education, because that's the generation that we can make the biggest impact on in the next 5 years? Which group of people do you think we really ought to, if we really mean making sure nobody is left behind, what does that mean? Okay, so this is something that is going to be part of what we do for the next 5 years. So I'd ask you to think big, take a few minutes, think about it, and then start dropping that stuff in the chat, and then we'll go back to some of those questions. So I'm hoping to see lots of pings now appearing in the chat. I can see Chris Hall's already been really active, and I knew he would, so thank you, Chris. I know you've been really tied up with stuff lately, so that's great. And as a true cooperator, some really interesting things there. Lifelong learning, you mentioned. Steph, you're talking about importance of community, looking at sustainable supplementary learning. I think some of that taps into what Natalie said with regard to, you know, the enhanced curriculum stuff that maybe, dare I say, as a country, can we afford that in the next 5 years? We've got to recover from COVID. Money's got to come from somewhere. And as Natalie said, it's already been clawed back in different ways and shapes. So what is it as a cooperative business we can do to make that difference? Norman, you make a comment here that actually we've lost some of those, what was the bigger support network in child development, I would say, around local communities providing youth clubs, drama clubs, youth orchestras. Is there something that we ought to be considering as a cooperative to plug that gap? Again, should we be campaigning to remove student loans to make that more of a fair and equitable approach for people to get into further educations? Should we be facilitating international twinning, for example, with regard to things, you know, I can see here that Chris Hall is saying maybe twinning with a school in Sudan or Costa Rica. That sort of gives a different perspective. As an international cooperative, you know, very active in that field, there are many cooperatives that we could facilitate some twinning with that might add value. So yeah, great opportunity there for a very different programme that actually maybe other businesses couldn't offer. Steve mentions the inclusion of cooperative values and principles as an integral part of the delivery of education at all levels. So should we be campaigning to make sure that there is a sort of module and programme of activity that we can provide to the education sector that puts cooperative values on the map? Certainly I know from experience that historically the cooperative as a business model used to appear in what was then the GCSE business study model. I think it got lost over some time. So who knows about that very successful business model? Ironically, more people are employed in cooperatives around the world than any other business model. Interesting that it's not maybe linked into business degrees, educational degrees. Great one there, Steve. You know, we work really closely with the Cooperative Party. So maybe we should be, you know, looking at campaigns or canvassing to ensure funds for pupil premium are not reduced by dates of data collection. You know, is that something that we should be taking up in the political arena on behalf of our educational partners? John is saying, should we be leading activists in protecting our most vulnerable children and using a collective cooperative voice with other independent co-ops to remind government of their obligation to support pupil premium and SEN? So really echoing and supporting what you're saying there, Natalie, earlier on, and John, with regard to the changes in you know, the curriculum funding. I can see more people are typing, which is great. Julian, great challenge here. How do we give access to the internet for all? Could we, for example, make it possible for children to come into our offices, nurseries, other locations and use the internet for school to do their homework if they don't have computers at home? We know that, you know, we absolutely had a challenge with sort of homeschooling, home learning, with the access to digital devices. We donated some actually through our utilities group to that, to people who really needed them. But maybe that should be something that we should be saying is our mantra for the next 3 years, 3 to 5 years, is making sure that, you know, every child has access to a digital device to enable them to get onto the internet. Wow, Anne. Singing, you talk about singing, and I know through the work that we did with our crazy composers, music is one of those things that sort of it impacts everybody at different times of their life. So, you know, absolutely, music being one of those, you know, equality things that everybody likes in the main, some sort of music. So do our young cooperators have the opportunity to form bands, consider orchestras? You know, in fact, actually going back from a heritage point of view, there used to be quite a lot of cooperative bands that had a youth section and supporting people with regard to that. I think there's still quite a few of those around, actually. Can Midcounties help to create a module in cooperatives and cooperation for the schools to adopt? With the stores nearby, it could be very practical, very hands-on. We, again, a build on what we're already doing around schools, stores as classrooms, but absolutely something that is within our sites that we could achieve. John talks about looking at the Lizard Peninsula cooperative academy chain where primary and senior schools are linked together. They're not directly funded by the co-op. They save money by pooling their resources. Mid-counties can afford to support a lot of schools, but perhaps encouraging members to engage with their local school, link with the local cooperative stores, extending the support of their membership. It already does, providing schools with information about co-ops. And John goes on about other opportunities to share the values of a cooperative. Helen, thanks for joining us, Helen. As per Kate, enhance the information and education as a co-op model, as a form of business startup. Co-op startups are more sustainable. This sector is growing, but is it visible? And again, you know, something that's pretty, I suppose, simple to everybody out there. You know, we support Cooperative Futures that looks at starting which helps sort of young cooperatives and help people to start up cooperatives, and maybe something through the education system that allows that. So Steve, in particular, Peter's just asked, working with the Co-op Party to enhance funds for pupil premium and not reduced by dates of collection, data collection. Could you expand on that? If you could put your microphone on, that would be useful. Really quite topical as Pete has been talking to the Cooperative Party on our Co-op conversation this afternoon. So Steve, if you'd just like to fill in a little bit more details.
Yeah, it was just borrowing on the remarks made by our colleague from the primary school, whereby just collecting the data in August rather than wherever they used to collect it, it seems to kind of reduce the amount that they were going to receive for pupil premium. And if it's just a change of date and it's as a consequence of COVID, is there kind of opportunity to work with partners to challenge that and say this is not part of the levelling up agenda. This will actually level down and hurt communities across the piece. So that's really where the idea comes from.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks. And then Chris mentions, you know, short of a Co-op Academy, you could adopt a school and then use a combination of buddying, shadowing and mentoring so the children learn about the wider cooperative movement. And I think that's a really good point, Chris, because we consider ourselves to almost have informally adopted a number of schools. Probably, if we're honest, we're working with 50. We've probably adopted and working really closely with 20 across the trading area. But to actually formalise that as a relationship and having a programme around that is something clearly that could be useful. Pete, I see you've got your hand up. Is there something that you want to add?
Yeah, it's purely to pick up on Steve's point, because it's exactly the same with our childcare nurseries, Tara. And it's that question of making sure that the funding that the government supplies is equitable. That's all anybody's asking for. So, Steve, we'll perhaps pick up that afterwards if we could, because I think there is something that we ought to be saying, a level playing field, to coin a phrase.
Yeah, absolutely.
To be there. Thanks.
Thanks, Peter.
That's great. OK, well, please keep typing in that chat because that's really useful for us. You know, we talk about what do you want us to focus on in the next 5 years? How can we create that positive impact? But also, I suppose, you know, on a practical level, if we were to pick up the newspaper in 5 years' time, what would you want to see that article, whether that be the Cooperative News or any other newspaper? What is it saying that the co-op have really made a difference in? So please keep putting into the chat any thoughts, because that's really helpful. I'd also want to give just a couple of minutes now back to John, Babita and Natalie in particular before we close down the session shortly to talk about, you know, so from what you've heard, guys, and about people's suggestions and so on and so forth, what is it that you think really resonates with you as educationalists, not necessarily in your particular area, but you know, generally, what do you think of the things that you've seen in the chat that really resonate with you? So maybe I'll go to John first.
Two things that sort of pick up, and I'm going to go back to one of them that was in the chat earlier on. Something I experienced when I was working in the States was the fact that I was working in one of the most deprived areas in New York City, and they had counsellors who went out to support young people who were the first generation to go to university, because the dropout rate in colleges in the US for disadvantaged young people is incredibly high. And what they actually do was they started working with these young people before they went, and also after they went to college, to make sure that they actually stuck the college course through, in terms of providing emotional support, but also practicalities about what you pack in your bag, what you need to go, you know, and getting accommodation, because going to university, there are so many barriers to young people who have not got a family history of going, and we really need to promote that. The other thing that I thought was very interesting was somebody was really talking about an award or a set of values that a school could sign up to, and would be a kudos for the school to say, we work with the Midcounties Co-operative, we have recognised their values, this is how we do it, and we're proud to display the cooperative sign, logo, charter mark within our school to say we have adopted those values and this is how we do it, so that when we get those external people in that we all love to not talk about, we can go, this is what we do, this is our ethos here, and this is how we do it. Because a lot of the thing people are missing is that don't think about curriculum as extracurricular, think about it as co-curricular. Co-curricular means that forest school is just as important as sitting in a classroom and writing in a book, because the creativity, the story writing, the imagination is incredible being done there. And if the school could charter mark that and carry it on, you would actually find a kudos for the school, but you would be investing heavily into the futures. And that's not a big cost. That's something that is a small cost but great impact. Because when we look at D&V awards, which we are big with and we push hard, it is all about that social responsibility. It is all about that sticking to something. It is all about working as a member of a cooperative team, which we call crews in the outward bound world. There you go, Sarah.
Thank you, John. And Natalie, what's resonated with you, that what you've heard in the chat?
Yeah, for us, I think at a primary level, it would definitely be the twinning with another school. The great thing about being part of an academy is you get a cluster, you get to share, but what we don't get to share with really is outside of the cluster. So we would love to twin with a cooperative school. I know you've got one in Gloucester, which is within a travelling distance for us. That would be great for us, because we have things that we can offer, but we also don't have things which I'm sure you can offer. So the opportunity to twin with another school and share resources, share ideas, and have that linking programme. Minimal cost. We have minibuses, so you can share that collaborative approach towards education. And being part of a MAT, we have a certain way of doing things, but you're a different MAT, so you'll have a different way of doing things that we can learn from. And that is something that actually MATs don't do very often. They don't collaborate with other MATs, they collaborate within themselves. And often you might get the odd local authority school thrown in, but that's about it. And when I said it, I did put in the chat earlier to Babita, we have a great outdoor area. Why doesn't she come? Why doesn't she bring her little ones to us and we can share that? And actually, it was the cooperative volunteers that helped us build part of the outdoor area. So that kind of collaboration at a minimal cost, maximum output would be the way forward. And I think if you really want to have sustainable change in primary education and you really want to open up those opportunities, that sharing programme is for me, is the best way to go.
That's brilliant. No, great. And you know, this idea of cooperation is not new. Sometimes we just have to remind ourselves that it's pretty easy to do. Just have to think outside the box a little bit. I'd like to actually bring in, if I could now, we've got a co-operative supporter, Chris Hall, who's mentioned a number of things with regard to potentially how we could use our international status and, you know, being a cooperative leader internationally as part of our education agenda. So Chris, do you want to take yourself off mute and maybe talk about some of the things that you've put in the chat and what you really think are the things that we ought to consider, you know, on a wider international level?
Okay, thank you. Well, firstly, I just think that the twinning's got so much to apply to it. In the past, we simply couldn't have done it in a realistic way. But now, because of Zoom, I just think you really do have the possibilities, and it's Zoom and other possible media, to work out the right sort of twinning. And it's a very delicate process, because you can't just twin up with somebody in 3 weeks' time. So you're going to have to think about the subject or the area. Do we do a little discrete project and then talk to another school, or do we say we're looking for a longer term relationship? So what is the subject that brings us together? I've put in also a link and reference to films by Sarah Beccari, and I know John Boyle, for example, is one of our good friends will know about Sarah. She has produced a series of short video films that last about 15 minutes, and I'm going around recommending to all good cooperative societies that in your AGM, probably not this year, but maybe in a future year, you play one of those, because they are so inspirational. Everybody who watches one will go, wow, that's cooperation. And so, in others, the educational medium through film is going to be a good one for us going ahead. I've also provided the specific link to a school that has a co-op called Kepala Batas in Malaysia, and everything that school does is cooperative. Now, they're not a cooperative academy, of course, but that's the point. The co-op model is flexible enough to enable us to do so many things in a slightly different but nevertheless cooperative way. And then the final thing perhaps I wanted to say, because I did a paper on it for Wales, Wales hasn't really embraced the cooperative education approach, is that I passionately believe cooperative learning has got something massively in its favour against competitive learning. By the way, I have no problem with competitive sport. Sport is always to be competitive. I get that. I support my football team and they usually lose. A bit of competition, good for us all. But when it comes to education for children at school and that sort of thing, just imagine if we actually said to them, you're not going to compete against each other, but you're more often going to work as part of a team, and therefore the soft skills of working with others, trying to achieve something, and that they actually went through the process. Someone might take charge of a project, someone might be writing up about the project, someone might be taking pictures on the project, and they would actually, it'd be the process itself would be much more useful than making them compete and actually keep the knowledge to themselves. So sharing of the knowledge and then benefiting as a team and then analysing outcomes. So there's a few thoughts. Thank you.
No, Chris, and you know, I absolutely think you've got some fantastic ideas, things that we wouldn't have thought about. But your last point, I can actually talk from experience. One of the things that we have built up over the years is a program called the Green Pioneers, which John was a fundamental contributor to building that to what it is today, where we take youngsters from all levels of education, capability on an outward bound course, and part of that is an expedition where they leave no trace, so out in all weathers, in the hills, in Wales, and I can actually wear my badge with pride that I survived as an individual, a colleague. I worked on the basis that I couldn't ask my colleagues within the team to support it if I hadn't done it. It nearly killed me, I have to say. My body's never been the same since. But actually what I saw through my own experience in a 72-hour process was how in part of a team, individuals found their place and found what they could contribute to. Yep. And absolutely, it was very much around, you know, a life-changing experience for me to observe it as a group of young people. And I will be very thankful to the two young gentlemen who I have to say were the rebels of the pack, who considered themselves to be supportive of age concern and stood by me as we walked across the hills in the rain, telling me we can do this. And I'll never forget those young two gentlemen for their motivation and their support. So I absolutely agree, and I know that John will concur with that in those different circumstances, personality is grown, character is grown, but also attitude. and that intergenerational thing that's also been mentioned. I do personally, my personal view is that there's a lot to be learned from different generations, and whether that be for, you know, our 11-year-olds to our 5-year-olds, or our 5-year-olds to our 65-year-olds, whatever that might be, the sharing of that knowledge, that experience, whatever that might be of life, or even just a different approach to looking at something, is so valuable, and something that if it's brokered and nurtured can add a huge difference. So no, thanks for that, Chris. That's great. I've also noticed in here that Stephen Hawksworth, again, great supporter of the Society, has talked about careers guidance. And John, maybe I can pull you into that for a second, because Stephen's comment here is that he believes that careers advice is not as good as it could have been. In fact, I think he uses the phrase there, it's as poor as it was 50 years ago. So maybe you just want to respond back to that, and to see whether or not you think actually his suggestion of putting ambassadors into schools is something that, you know, absolutely could add value to the greater thinking.
Yeah, I mean, we've worked quite heavily with Midcounties over a long period of time now, because we collapse our curriculum for our sixth formers, and we spend time with the students who want to go to university, looking at UCAS and things like that, but with our students who want to go on to apprenticeships, actually doing mock interviews, CV writing, letters of application. We don't do that. We actually have all the volunteers coming in from Midcounties Co-operative to work with our students doing it, because we aren't experts on industry. We're experts on learning. Careers advice, and Natalie has touched on funding. We're not funded. We're literally just not funded. We actually have quite a big careers team. We start our careers education programme in year 8. Every child in this country has a legal right to an independent careers interview. That's a legal right. Most of that was sold off to companies and corporations who made money out of it. You can, as a school, provide that by your own staff. We don't have people who come from education doing that. We actually have an independent company. We use one person, but we actually employ 2 other people who've worked in industry for a long periods of time, who actually come in and talk to our young people about letters of application, work experience, why work experience is so important, but work experience has got to be valuable in year 10 and above. So it is a lot better than it used to be, but a lot of schools now will not put young people out under 16, because going into a workplace under 16, what can they actually do? What could be a good way forward for co-op is that a Saturday job and a part-time job is an amazing and valuable lifelong experience. Advertising jobs and situations and possibilities within the schools might actually engage those young people, so it adds to their careers, you know, their career profile, but also that lifelong learning, because there's so many people I've met who work for Co-op who started when they're 17 or 22 or 23, and they're there 20 years later and 30 years later, and that's a rarity in business. It's a rarity in schools as well. So that it isn't bad. I think the picture in schools is actually a lot better than we think. And I know that Reese is just correct. Can I just mention the lovely Reese Fallon, and hello Reese, I saw your brother today, and Reese was one of our ex-students who's now works for Midcounties, and it was through his work experience with Midcounties Co-operative, and Midcounties Co-operative do actually employ quite a lot of our ex-students, and came to work for Midcounties and has been back. One thing about our students, and one thing we're finding when they do go to work for local industries, they come back and influence the next generation and the next years and the years below, and that's vital. So putting that back in is a great ethos.
Wow, thanks, John. Okay, Well, I'm very conscious of the time and what a healthy debate, and I have no doubt, knowing most of the participants on this call tonight, we could still be here at 10 o'clock tonight having this conversation and continue it tomorrow as well as. But I want to thank you sincerely for all of your contributions and some great things that you've put in the chat. You have, most of you, my direct email address. If you've got any thoughts tonight, Chris Hall is great for having thoughts. It's about 3 in the morning and email him. That's absolutely fine. Just drop them to us, because all of this will build into that whole funnel of information that we will use then to say, how can we possibly make the best difference that we can? So if I want to just remind you now that, I talked earlier about the 5-year strategy planning. You can see that what we're doing at the moment is kickstarting the stakeholder alignment programme. So today is the funnel where we're putting all of those ideas in. Over the summer, I will be asking a number of you again for your support with helping us to bring that down into some very clear and what we would say are our big goals for the next 5 years in education. And that's not because we're going to stop doing some stuff over here. It means we're actually going to really focus on some key things and drive some things forward for the next 5 years. So we hope to present that to our board. Well, we don't hope. I know I'm charged with presenting that to the board in September, and that will then form part of our overall business planning that will go into our next year's budgeting and so on and so forth. So huge thank you for that. So next slide is a plug, as I've already said, for our AGM, which is on Thursday evening. I'd ask you all, I know that you are all members, to join us on Thursday evening to register. I think Pranil's kindly put the link into the chat, so there's no excuses. But that's when we will vote on the differences, on how the society's contributions and distributions actually will generate some of the funds for what we've talked about here, but also sort of making those differences going forward. So please join us there. And then also a little bit of a plug, which will come after the video, which I'm going to show you, is around the fact that we have been awarded or put forward for leading cooperative of the year, and there will be a link that appears for you as well as, and I hope that you will find the time to vote for us. But before I do that, there's just a little thank you from somebody who's already on the call. So if you'd like to run the video, please, Pranil. Oh, have we got the first technical glitch of the night? Well then, I don't think that's going to run. So my apologies. Gremlins, I thought we were going to get through it without a gremlin. Ooh, is it playing for everybody else except for me?
It's not playing for me either.
No, I think there's a couple of people that it's playing for. So we've got some gremlins there. So we'll halt the video and I'll apologise to our president.
Do you want me to say it live?
Oh, you say it live, Helen. Thank you so much for saving me.
Okay. It was just really to thank everybody for joining us for the conversation this evening. It's been a really interesting and invaluable conversation. It's really part of our ongoing commitment to have these sorts of conversations, to listen to our members and get their views. So, we'll use this information, as Katara said, to inform the board, management, and all the colleagues in the society. So this is fantastic. So just wanted to say thank you very much. Look forward to you joining us for the AGM on Thursday if you're able to, and delighted that we've been nominated for Leading Co-op of the Year. So if you can see on the screen a little plug for us there. So thank you again for your contribution this evening. All of this helps us as part of our view to trying to make a better, fairer world. And this is a good way of doing it by having your contributions and your input so we can all work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. And finally, I'm absolutely indebted to our speakers this evening, who, as they have given up their evening to support us. I owe John Clark more cream cakes and cups of coffee now than I could ever pay for. Natalie, exactly the same, and I'm delighted that we continue to support you at North Walsall, and I know that your trips coming up to the seaside, hopefully we can get involved in those again this year, and your summer fair. And Babita, thank you again for bringing your contribution with regard to the young, our next generation of cooperators. And I said it earlier on in the conversations that let's just think before long there will be both a president and a CEO of your cooperative that have started in our nurseries and as a little pioneer, and we'll be sitting here where we are today talking about what a difference it made to them and what a difference we made to them as part of of their education and their lifelong learning. So thank you. Also thank you to Kate Beale. She's already voted. Again, I owe you lots of cream cakes as well, Kate. So thank you for that. Just left for me to say, have a good evening, everybody. Look forward to seeing you at the AGM and for future cooperative conversations where we can really make a difference to your cooperative. Thank you.